Hey Ben, remember that time you ran 100K, that's 62 miles all at once, and everything went perfectly?
Perfectly, no. I do not remember that, Noah. I remember almost all of the times where there was something that happened along the way, whether I was at the starting line and I realized I hadn't charged my watch the night before. I remember when I showed up with two right socks. These were toe socks, so they really wouldn't work on my right foot, but I was smart enough to figure out, I think I learned this along the way, that you just reverse one and all of a sudden it becomes a left toe sock. But no, I don't remember any race that ever just came across as perfect.
Have you done a lot of these kinds of long ultra marathons? I guess ultra means longer than a marathon. What's your experience with that?
Yeah, I've done quite a few. Um, done 50Ks. I've done, which is, 31 miles, kind of the entry to get into an ultra marathon. 50 milers, 100Ks, did all night 12-hour runs on a 1K loop. So yes, got some pretty good experience. And I started off doing road marathons, some triathlon, and then gradually decided I want to go a little bit slower, a little bit longer. So it was ultras on the trail. Mhm.
So obviously you don't just jump into a 100K run from nowhere. What does it take to actually be able to do that?
Yeah, so I think that with ultra running, like consulting, you need to learn that just something will always go wrong. It's not if, it's when. But if you prepare yourself well, you adapt and you keep moving. Honestly, that's consulting too. You can't control every variable, and you can control how you prepare and your mindset and your response when things are getting messy.
So with that kind of goal, you must be training for months, maybe longer, just to be able to do that. And uh, where do you start, and how do you know that you're progressing how you should?
Yeah, a lot of trial and error, like a lots of trials and error. I started off with basically knowing nothing about ultra marathons. I read a book, Born to Run, wonderful
Mm.
book. It's all about, barefoot running, just, a little bit more primal, really exciting stuff. But over time, got excited about the sport, really nerded out, listened to lots of podcasts, read a lot of books, caught up with the community, learned a lot
Yeah.
just from the experts throughout. And a lot was just my own personal experience. What was the right fuel? What were the drinks that were working? What was the right training program? Checking out the different courses ahead of time. What would be smart? What do I have to charge my watch the
Yeah.
night before? Right. So it's things like that. And I really love learning. So just nerding out on the training and the experience worked really well for me.
What I'm hearing is to get better at the goal of an ultra marathon, you had to get better at the prep. And that really resonates as I think about technology consulting.
Mhm.
We don't just go through the motions and deliver something and it's like, all right, well that worked 100% perfect, so it's going to do that again. In fact, it's quite the opposite. I feel like over our careers, the early stuff had lots of problems and we learned a few things along the way. Most likely there were so many problems that you could only pick a couple of things
Mm.
as
Yeah.
positive takeaways and just make sure you apply those next time. And then
Mhm.
over time, when you've done it 10, 15 projects or 10, 15 ultras, whatever the case may
Mhm.
be, large complex initiatives, right? Then
Mhm.
you refine the whole process. You know you're in tune with your body, or you're in tune with how you engage with your team on a project.
Mhm. Yeah, you definitely do, but you don't know it all. And you have to be ready for the unexpected. In consulting, you still have your training block. It's your discovery phase. You get to understand the client environment, mapping your route, knowing where the obstacles might be. And if you skip this phase, that it's really not going to play out in your favor. So the main thing is to prepare as much as possible, hedge your bets, but realize that you're going to need to adapt. You're going to need to turn to others for support. You're going to need to dig really deep inside for that own support as well. But, adaptability, continuously learning how to, move forward relentlessly.
It's interesting, and I want to talk more about adaptability, but it does make me think of one thing I learned fairly early on was that defects start during the analysis phase, meaning you could
Mhm.
be coming up with customer requirements, and
Right.
if you have the wrong thing because you misheard the customer or they didn't know how to communicate what they
Yeah.
wanted, you already have a defect before you've even started designing or building it. And that's just going to carry on through the whole thing until
Hmm.
it's in front of a customer and they realize, oh, that was completely the wrong thing.
Hmm.
So you cut that off as early as you can, and that reduces how much you need the
Hmm.
adaptability, but you will always need that adaptability. It's just plan and prep as much as you can within reason, and then you
Right.
still need to adapt. But how does that adaptability show up in running? You mentioned the toe sock thing and the
Yeah.
watch, and how does it show up in consulting?
Hmm. Yeah, that I love that. So with consulting, as with ultra running, it's all about, as we were mentioning, that preparedness. It's knowing something's going to go wrong and it's getting into your bag of tricks. And it's, all right, I've seen this before. I have confidence in myself and the team in consulting, and we're going to get back on the right track and things are going to be okay. We know going in that there will be surprises and just be ready for those surprises. Look for those early indications like, oh, that's weird. Like our team isn't maybe team members are showing up a little bit late for stand-ups or this, we have just a few more defects that are being logged each sprint. Customers getting a little bit short with us, or maybe they're not showing up to the meeting. So just having a really continuously checking in on the state of things. And that's really important with ultra running as well. You get that little twinge in your leg. It's like, well, is this going to be a thing that I have to keep following up on and checking in on? Or can I just keep running through it? That you say, or they say in racing generally, if you're thirsty, like it's already too late. Like you missed it. You're already starting to dehydrate. And I think the same becomes true when it comes to consulting. If you wait until the problem's obvious, well, it's already costing you. So yeah, just really going into things, just feeling it and just making sure that you are paying attention to every detail.
It's really interesting because we've talked about things like tools failing or budgets getting
Hmm.
slashed or a critical person on the team leaves. We never expect this, but
Right.
we can plan for it without it turning into a giant disaster recovery or business continuity discussion. It's
Hmm.
just that little bit more of preparedness that makes you adaptable. Just to bring the
Yeah.
terms back full circle, that lets you think through, okay, what if this did happen? What if this person did leave? And if you have some backup options that you've thought through a little bit, it
Hmm.
makes a much larger chance of not disrupting the team. And there's always a way forward. We know that with running, with the communities that support us, and with
Sure.
technology consulting.
Hmm. Yeah, and you can't plan for everything. You've got to,
Right.
it's really impossible. There's the whole risk analysis. Like you were saying, like early on, if you misinterpret your requirements, you already have a defect.
Right.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, the perfect plan never survives first contact with the project, right? Like you said, tools break, person leaves. You're not going to have the backup to the backup to the backup person, but something's going to come up and you need to, you hope you have those conversations with people up front. You can kind of recognize like, all right, I think they're on the way out. Well, now how do we act? How do we make sure that things stay on track from there? Mhm.
Well, you mentioned when you were talking about adaptability earlier, the continuous learning side, which is the
Yeah.
thing that feeds being adaptable. So I know you could talk about it from the ultra training
Hmm.
perspective. We could both talk about it from the technology side. I'm curious, what did that continuous learning look like for you on the ultra side? And then we can tie it to technology.
Yeah, for sure. So it was everything from the pair of shoes that I was wearing to which races makes the most sense based on what my personal and work calendar looks like. You know,
Sure.
there's how frequently after a race should I do another one. So it was constant feedback on every training run. Every rest day gave me some great feedback. So
Yeah.
it was constant learning. I was doing things like checking my heart rate every morning just to try to get a gauge of how well I'm recovering, right? I was tracking all of my foods and which ones really worked well for my stomach, but also really fed me. I was picking up tricks and watching people who were doing this. It wasn't necessarily a conversation, but always finding out like, oh, that's a cool hat, the one that looks like mesh so it can still breathe, but it's going to cover your neck at the same time. Well, that's
Yeah.
smart. As I'm running and the back of my neck is probably still leathery from those days. So yeah, it's that continuous learning along the way, and you try to turn up the good, and you try to also just not do those wrong things too often.
I want to lean in on two things that you mentioned. One is just measuring things consistently, and the other
Hmm.
is rest and the importance of rest. So
Yeah.
getting rest first, I certainly know this from my own more limited experience
Yeah.
with trail running and how critical that is, or with weight training, or really with anything in life. Any
Hmm.
technology consulting team, they might deliver a sprint, but then it's immediately moving on to the next one, the next one, the
Yeah.
next one. It's a never-ending cycle, and you have to take that break not only for your sanity,
Yeah.
whether running or on a tech consulting team, but to get the appropriate feedback, to leave time for the customer or whoever your stakeholders are
Hmm.
to process and experience what you've built so that you're continuing to head in the right direction. So that rest is huge for that side. And then of course the measuring things, I was
Hmm.
doing that, and you see your progress in such an interesting way.
Right.
Running an ultra marathon takes months to a year of prep time, which we've talked about. That
Sure.
means your progress is going to be slow.
Yeah.
A team that's building a large, complex platform or project, it's going to be slow. It's going to take time to really see those positive results. So what
Hmm.
do? We chunk it out into 2 week sprints if we're following that process. We have
Yeah.
a retrospective. We measure what we've done. We set up a team's velocity, and we set some expectations, and we
Hmm.
leave room to not hit the velocity, just like we leave room not to hit our 10-mile training goal for the week because we didn't rest or
Hmm.
because our knee is tweaked, whatever it might be.
Sure.
That continuous learning has to come down to proper measurement and tracking so you
Hmm.
know what your baseline is. And so you
Yeah.
see those small incremental improvements. That's really critical.
Mhm. It is critical. And one of the things that you just mentioned, which I really like, is with your velocity. You don't go into any engagement and, oh, here's our velocity. Day one, sprint one, right? Takes three, four, five of those attempts to get a
Mhm.
velocity, which you can start working off of. Still, you're not gonna hit it every time. You're gonna grow, or who knows what happens, but you continue to measure even when you think you have that burning down the way you
Right.
would want it. It's a great example. The rest that you mentioned too, I find that that's super interesting, especially when it comes to, you know, our Scrum and Agile methodologies, right? There's a reason why they're called sprints because they really are all out at the end of 2 weeks. Let's say 2 weeks could be a variety of
Sure.
the duration, but 2 weeks, we're going to demo, we're going to ship something. Great. We take that split-second break to celebrate, and then you pick up another sprint on Monday. It never ends. There's Hopefully, you're doing some sort of retrospective so the team can just break and have an hour to themselves. Yes, you've got the sprint kickoff so you can recover and plan a little bit, but it's a sprint after sprint after sprint. It isn't something that teams, I believe, can maintain. And that's coming from somebody who's done ultra marathons where you think, oh my gosh, you're just going forever and ever. But you build those breaks in. You build both the mindset and the physical breaks in as you're doing these long distance things.
And your body will tell you if you haven't done that.
Oh yeah.
That's the amazing thing. And sometimes our brains don't process it the same way. Our brains attempt to take on more than they should,
Hmm.
and your body responds a little bit more clearly and faster. But you made
Right.
me think about just the milestones that we have with sprints. If you're measuring well and your retrospectives are more focused on team accomplishments and not the here's what went wrong, let's, that
Hmm.
they can really drag, they can get kind of negative. So you have to be really careful with that. But what I see on the high performing team side of things, or
Hmm.
just with my own running training, is if you had a goal or a milestone and you set out a training plan and you accomplished something that seemed a little bit challenging at the time, maybe it was your first 5 mile run,
Yeah.
and then you look back as you continue your consistent training and measurement, and your 5 mile run is no longer uh, daunting. In fact, it's the shortest run you do in a week. And now
Sure.
the half marathon is the bit of a stretch goal, and it builds up and builds up. And when you're doing ultras, you might run a marathon to train for your ultra,
Yeah.
which is
Totally.
insane. And you look back at the year it took you to get to that point, and if you don't measure it, if you don't really appreciate what it took you to get there, it doesn't have the same weight. And I think technology teams can do that too. It's so easy to get lost in, we're doing this 2 week chunk, and
Hmm.
that's what's important right now. And the customer's going to call out defects, and you can get into that negative cycle on it. But
Mm.
you look back at what you achieved, if your team is solid and you're measuring it all the time, I bet
Hmm.
it's pretty impressive.
Yeah, it's so interesting. Yeah, there's the macro, right? How are we doing in the engagement, the delivery all along? And then you can get all the way down to I'm engineer one, and this is my specific task right now that I'm really focused on. It's the same with the long distance run. Like I just, all I can do right now is focus on the next step. How do I get to
Right.
that next mile marker or the aid station or that tree, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
At the same time, though, keeping your head up and realizing like there's still a long way to go. So, right. And as you take those steps, as you complete those tasks, you realize they start snowballing and eventually you'll get to the end and hopefully enjoy that success.
Well, I'd love to hear more about that, because you talked about that individual journey, but
Mm,
we both know that that is it's not how you succeed in either a tech
right.
consulting project or in a long trail run. You have to have that support around you. I'm just curious your experience on that.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, ultra running, it's an individual sport. Like that's the way that, I think most people think about it. That's how I think about it. I think it's really you and what you're capable of that day. Um, that said, there's a lot of people cheering you on, whether it's at home, whether it's at the finish line, maybe it's on the course. There's also the other participants. They're
Yeah.
running right alongside you, some way ahead of you, some a little bit behind, but we're going through the same experience, right? We're having the same ups and the same downs. We can cheer each other on. There's a comfort in knowing that there's other people out there. And I've had cases where I was cramping up really bad and somebody's like, here's some salt tablets. There's been other cases where people were saying like, hey, I only brought two right socks. And I said, oh, one inside out. Uh, so we're all in it together, which is really nice. And that's the same thing when it comes to, 99.9% of all the deliveries we've worked on. There's a team there. We might have our own individual tasks, but we're really working together, rooting each other on, hopefully comfortable enough so that we can share, say, oh, this is the thing that we're doing really great. These are the things that we might want to do some improvement upon. But
Yeah.
we're same goal, really, just maybe looking at the overall team goals as well as the individual goals as you move forward.
Well, and that makes me think of my ultra, which was a
Yeah.
50K that you were my mentor for. I hadn't done it before. I had been building up my training, but I wanted to take on that challenge on a
Hmm.
trail. And I came to you because I knew you had nerded out on it and were going to give me some great advice. You were
Sure.
my champion in that case and kind of
Hmm.
gave me the freedom to fail. You helped me see what was appropriate as I was measuring things, and I would be
Hmm.
frustrated and reach out to you and say,
Yeah.
my pace went down by 20 seconds per mile. I
No.
felt like I was in great shape. What happened? And
Yes.
you were just there to listen, and you weren't trying
Hmm.
to fix it, but you were trying to just create the space that this
Yeah.
happens sometimes. And you and
Hmm.
I have been on technology teams together, and I think we've done the same thing for each other in that role.
Sure.
Frustrations come up, difficulties, all the things we talked about that you have to remain adaptable for.
Hmm.
And it follows the same pattern, right? It's just
Yes.
who's that champion? Who's going to be that mentor? And anyone on any team can be a mentor at any time. It doesn't have to be
Sure.
that senior to junior relationship at
Right.
all. Just be
Right.
open to it. Be open to someone really contributing to the
Hmm.
betterment of your own experience.
Definitely. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So we've covered a lot here. I'm thinking we've covered planning and prep. That's a big part
Hmm.
of this. We've covered adaptability, all the things that can go wrong. You don't know when something might go wrong.
Right.
The cycle of continuous learning, having that
Hmm.
resilience, knowing that things do go wrong, but if you've got the right support around you, you're on this shared journey, you're with a community that's there to support you, yeah,
Hmm.
you're going to do some amazing things. Is there any other takeaways that you wanted to share?
So those are the big things now. It is pretty exciting to see the parallels between what we do in our own time versus in our week time, our work time, excuse me.
Yeah,
I, you have things, you mentioned you run, but also like music is a passion of yours.
right.
Certainly, there's a connection or parallels between what you do in your off time versus your work time. It'd be pretty great to have a conversation around that sometime. I'd really like that. And then I
Yeah.
bet there's just other people that recognize that too. Like, what is it they do that they can bring into the workplace, and what do they do in the workplace that they can bring into real life? I'd love to hear a little bit more about that if we end up having people that start knocking on our door about this podcast.
Yeah, I think we've just teed up a next topic that sounds great. I'm excited to share my experience. I'm big on work-life balance or life-work balance as I tried to rebrand it
Hmm.
because life should come first. Not sure that's
Sure.
going to stick, but I tried. But yeah, let's uh let's dig into it in the next one.
Sounds good.
Awesome. Thanks. Talk to you
All right.
soon.
Bye.